It's time to check in on the latest Matt Williamson mock draft. I believe it's 3.0 already for this draft season.
It is.
Post free agency. How have things changed since we've seen the major free agents movement around the NFL? Picks 1 through 31, because there's only 31 picks in the first round this year. Coming up on this episode of Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick before we get going here with your latest mock draft, Matt, post free agency, does the league consider the forfeited Miami Dolphins pick? First of all, how frustrating is it for Miami Dolphins fans who had 2 first rounders at one point, now have no first round picks, and they're like, mock draft, cool. Oh, wait, we don't have any picks. It's over in the 49ers. They don't have any first or second round picks. So I'm like scouring the internet for 3-round mock drafts just to finally see a pick for the 49ers to talk about on our podcast. But does the league consider the pick at 21 that the Miami Dolphins forfeited? Do they consider that a selection that is 21 that is forfeited? Then they go to 22, or is the 22nd pick now the 21st pick? Because speaking of those 49ers, they pick at 99. Is it really the 98th pick? Because
that I don't know. That's a good question.
As forfeited, so maybe every team
one less pick in the draft, or right.
So maybe every team in the NFL drafts, their team actually picks one spot sooner. You traded up one extra spot than you think it is by what number it is next to your pick after pick 20.
Yeah, and that I don't know, but it must be grueling on you, in particular, or the Dolphins or the Rams or whomever that don't pick for so long. I mean, just my personal experience, if you go look at drafthistory.com for the Steelers, every year of my life that I paid attention to the Steelers, they always had a first round pick. Never traded. And then Minka, they traded it, so it's like, wow, I don't know what to do with myself after 40 years of having a pick, right in a row.
It's amazing.
Too bad if you're not one of them, folks.
What's funny is it's so hard to know. The draft is already unpredictable. We'll talk about the first round here and how unpredictable the first pick is even for us right now. But when you get down into the third round, remember last season when the New England Patriots made the surprising selection of Cole Strange, the small school guard at the end of round 1, and Sean McVay and Les Snead of the Rams were doing a live stream because they knew they didn't have a pick until the third round. They're like, man, we can cross him off our list. He was the guy we were hoping to maybe get there in the third round, and he went in the first round. So, like, how agonizing is that to see your board just get blown up so early on, and you don't get the pick until very late in the draft after everyone's picked a couple of times. But anyways, moving on to the first pick in the NFL.
Before we do, there's just one little note about this draft. I think I've said this before, but just to be clear, and it's a little more obvious when you actually do the mock yourself. I think there's about a dozen guys that I'm sure are going to be first-round picks, maybe 15. That number's lower than it usually is. But after that, there might be 40, 45 whose name, if you read any mock and go, oh, he's a first-round pick. I can understand that. Usually that number's 45 for 32 spots. Now it feels like it's 60 for 31.
Yeah, and usually, I think generally around 20 guys most teams have on average as first-round grades. Might be a little lower than that this year, but there's a lot of players to like throughout the top 50. So the difference between 20 and 50 might not be that much this year.
Exactly. I mean, I always bring it back to the Steelers. The Steelers have 17, 32, and I'm not sure there's much difference at all. And they have 49. They're all about the same. All
right, so let me know when we hit that threshold in the first round of your mock draft here, and how did you decide the first pick for the Carolina Panthers?
I think Stroud's going to be the pick. Now, I mean, I've heard mixed reports. They like Young, they like Stroud. They're not sure. Maybe there's a little Niners, Mac Jones, Lance going on even. I just think the more I've watched Stroud, the more impressed I am with him, the fewer questions I have with him. I think he's my quarterback one. I think he's their quarterback one. The McCown stuff adds up. Reich has always had a 6'4" or taller quarterback, and Stroud doesn't quite meet that threshold, but he's not little. And people criticize Stroud for not running enough. But if you watch him, he uses his feet very well to set up throws. I mean, he's a very good player. I like him more and more the more I watch him.
I never understood the running thing, and
Yeah.
clearly he showed against Georgia in the college football playoff that he can use it, so it's there and usable. But I would much rather have a guy who doesn't use his legs enough to run than he uses his legs as a crutch and can't perform from the pocket. So
Right.
in a lot of ways, CJ Stroud is just the simplest pick because he's not an outlier size wise. He's got a good arm. He's very accurate. He fits the size profile. He was super productive. So it's harder to poke holes in CJ Stroud than any of the other top quarterbacks.
Immediately, I mean, my first impact or first thing to look at him in this draft when I was just getting exposed to it many moons ago, I was like, boy, Ohio State quarterbacks, I don't trust them. But you can't help but scout. I mean, I'm not going to hold that against them.
Yeah, scouting the helmet would be the biggest thing against him. And to be honest with you, I would personally hold a little bit against Ohio State quarterbacks and Alabama quarterbacks just because of what we've seen in the past. And they play up
our whole lifetime.
They play up because of the talent on your football team. And we saw Mac Jones. Maybe he wasn't worth the pick he was used at. And Tua, he was not going to be the top 5 pick in a draft, most likely if it happened again, right? In that same class. Right. And because they have so much talent on the field, and Ohio State's the same. And he's got another couple of stud first-round wide receivers he's throwing to CJ Stroud. So, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be easy. But as far as this class goes, it feels like CJ Stroud is easiest. And it's really wild how the entire mock drafting world went from Bryce Young as the number 1 quarterback to CJ Stroud the moment the Panthers traded up. So maybe
it is a little odd, yeah. But Stroud also has a little more momentum, too. I mean, his best game, or at least his best scouting game, was against Georgia, and then he had a great combine. And meanwhile, Bryce Young's just kind of hung out. Well, he has a pro day coming up too. So, I mean, a lot of this is media driven. But of course, I have Young going to the Texans. I mean, he's not slipping far.
I did think that it was going to be really shocking to me that an NFL team would spend all it would take to trade up to number 1 to draft such an outlier size-wise like Bryce Young. There's a lot to like with Bryce Young, but it would be a hard sell, I think, to be like, hey, we're going to spend 3 first-round picks, give up our best receiver, all this stuff to go up and draft a 5'10" quarterback.
Yeah, and sometimes I look at these things like you're applying for a loan, and in a way you are to your owner. Like I walk into a bank saying, here's my business plan. I'm going to invest. I'm going to risk all this stuff. Give me a couple $1 million so I can get to Williamson Inc. up and running. And they're like, okay, well, what are you going to buy with that? This quarterback that fits no profile that's ever worked in the history of the NFL. I don't know if you're getting that loan, Mr. Williamson, I'm
going to open a donut shop. Oh, what makes your donut shop unique? Well, the donuts are only this big. They're like 4 centimeters around. Like, right. It's an outlier. I don't know if that's going to work.
And they're made out of carrots.
I'd be shocked if that honestly exists somewhere around here.
Probably does. Right.
Here's what I think from the Texans' standpoint about this pick now at number 2 is they want to fall in love with the guy who's going to be there at 2. So if they spend all this time, they better really love Stroud or really love Bryce Young. And if they fall in love with the other one, and the other one they fall in love with is the one that the Panthers take at 1, I wonder how they feel about it. Like, did they love Bryce Young all along? And then maybe the Panthers do take Bryce Young. And they're like, we like Stroud, but we loved Young. So they don't want to fall in love with the guy who's not there. So I wonder if they'll talk themselves into both of them, just knowing one of them's going to be there.
Lovey, why'd you have to win that last game?
Yeah, exactly. That moves us to number 3 with the Arizona Cardinals after Stroud and Bryce Young are off the board 1-2.
Will Anderson, ho-hum, kind of boring. I wonder if people are going to try to, maybe the Raiders will try to get the 3. I wasn't allowed to do a trade in this one. So I think that's a pencil them in. Jalen Carter has some off the field. So give me the safe Will Anderson pick,
And remind the listeners where they can go find the text version of this mock draft.
Steelers.com.
The reason why you couldn't do a trade is because this was for a publication as well.
Yeah, this is for the Steelers official website. This is for Steelers.com. And there's a video. There's 3 of us that do them. And we all compare each other's and do a video and all that. So that's where you'll find.
Pick number 4, Indianapolis Colts. Not moving up and sitting there with a couple of quarterbacks. So maybe they go another direction and shock the world a little bit. What do you think?
I didn't. I kept it pretty chalky here in the top, 5, 6, 7-ish and have him going Anthony Richardson. I mean, they grab, the Eagles offensive coordinator. Obviously, they know stylistically how to use such a quarterback. Minshew comes over. Like, just run it back with a big, strong, athletic dude, and you can live with Minshew for the first year if you even had to.
It just really feels like it's setting up this way for a quarterback. You draft Gardner Minshew, who's not going to get in the way of a quarterback, but can start some games for you. He's the perfect stopgap, low dollar starter, can be your backup, your number two, has been around the league a little bit. And with Steichen already there doing the same thing with another athletic quarterback and seeing the development under Steichen for Jalen Hurts, Anthony Richardson starts to feel like a pretty good pick here. And if you're going to go Will Levis, he's raw enough and has enough work to do. Might as well go with the guy and swing for the fences that has even more raw tools than Levis, and that's Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, that was my thoughts too. I mean, again, it's kind of chalky, not real exciting, but it's just, I think that goes that way.
And he fits the size profile. Chris Ballard loves big, strong quarterbacks. And that's one of the reasons why I was like, I just don't see them trading up for Bryce Young. Anthony Richardson absolutely fits the size profile for Chris Ballard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Jalen Carter to the Seattle Seahawks at 5.
So I've been told by pretty good sources I trust that Carter is going to go somewhere 5 to 10. And all 5 of those teams, Seattle, Detroit, Vegas, Atlanta, Bears, Eagles, would all be very interested. And I just think if you're going to get the best player in the draft, your coach is 70 some years old. Maybe I would consider quarterback here if I was Seattle. I would consider quarterback with the next pick, with those first of 2 first rounders. But I think, Pete Carroll says, give me the best player in the draft. I'm not going to be doing this much longer. Let's go.
They've got the quarterback.
Draymond Jones,
Yeah, they could definitely take quarterback, and I don't think the way it's structured with the Geno Smith contract, that quarterback should be out of the equation for them if the right guy is there for them. Would that be Will Levis in this situation? I don't know. And I think this top 5 is going to be pretty chalky. I think this is a very likely top 5 if you were to try to put money on it here in March post free agency with these 5 picks. And Jalen Carter, this is where it gets serious with Jalen Carter, because if the Seahawks do pass on him after Will Anderson's off the board, after some of the top quarterbacks are on the board, then there's something there with red flags. And the Seahawks haven't been really the team that is the most likely team out there, I would consider, to pass on a player because of red flags. They've been a team that's willing to take some chances there. So if he gets past the Seahawks, I think that says a lot about Jalen Carter. And I'm not going to disagree with you sources, Matt, but it is lying season as well. So
of course.
I don't think teams are done with their background. That's why I kind of call it lying season, because I don't think teams really have that thing finished yet. I think Carter's probably in a holding pattern on teams' boards right now where they don't know whether to take him off, move him into another category, or just keep him right where they have him with their grade as one of the top players in the draft.
I wouldn't be shocked if he takes a visit to all 5 of those teams I mentioned, though. They spend the day with them.
Absolutely. And certainly the Detroit Lions could be one of those here at pick number 6 in the first round. We'll find out who that player is next. I think after these top 5, this is where the draft starts to get very serious, especially now that we've seen some new free agent homes for some NFL veterans around the league, including in Detroit. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The NCAA tourney heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure. Love the app. Love the website. Super easy to navigate and use. Find your bets. Build your own bets. Then you can bet on everything from the tournament, money line, to point scores, threes drained, NBA basketball. There is NFL draft props, which I always love. My favorite thing to bet on sports-wise every single year to go along with the tournament. That's why I love the springtime Major League Baseball getting going. Just had my fantasy baseball draft. That'll be going all summer long every day. So FanDuel also lets you combine your bets for a better chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Pick number 6 now of the Detroit Lions. They've done a lot of work in the secondary. The chalky pick has been Christian Gonzalez, maybe Witherspoon with a corner at number 6, because clearly a need going into the offseason. Now that they've added multiple players to their secondary, how has that changed the outlook for you, Matt, when you're projecting a player to the Detroit Lions at number 6?
Yeah, I think I've put a corner there the first 2 go rounds, but I think that's off the table now. I considered Tyree Wilson as a bookend to Hutchinson, but I thought maybe the smart big picture move is just take the quarterback, let him sit. You got 2 first-round picks. You've added a lot to your team. Just take a value position, and maybe you get a 10-year starter. So I gave him Will Levis.
They're in a perfect opportunity, the Lions are, to sit a quarterback and develop that guy and really make things brighter, higher upside for the future Detroit Lions and build this thing long-term. 2 first-round picks. When we originally did our first projecting in mock drafts, I thought, man, Anthony Richardson at 18 to the Detroit Lions is a great fit for me. And I just don't think Anthony Richardson's going to sniff 18 anymore. Although I don't know, like we thought this in past drafts before, and you see quarterbacks fall. Malik Willis and Matt Corral and everybody last year that wasn't named Kenny Pickett fell out of the first round and even out of the second round. In 2021, I thought there was no way in heck that Justin Fields and Mac Jones would get past 8 and 9, and they got to 11 and 15 respectively. So maybe after number 2, maybe the Colts don't love the other quarterbacks. Maybe the Lions don't love the other quarterbacks. Maybe those quarterbacks could fall if there's good enough players at other positions that teams like more. But all 4 quarterbacks now off the board, all of the stud, both those 2 stud defenders in Will Anderson and Jalen Carter now off the board for the Las Vegas Raiders at number 7.
Yeah, and maybe they would be happy to take Levis if he gets to 7, but I gave them Wilson. Again, a bookend for Max Crosby. Their defense needs an awful lot, and I think that'd be a good place to start.
5, 6, 7. Great spots for teams that wanted to sit a quarterback with veteran starters that could be usurped at some point in the next, calendar year or 2.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Tyree Wilson's an interesting one for me because he's this year's version of what we saw last year with Walker, who all of a sudden ended up at pick number 1. Yeah. And in the end, I think probably people out there shouldn't be shocked just because of his wingspan. He is exactly what NFL GMs and evaluators want to see in a defensive end prospect. And he was really, his production was really good as well. Had some injuries there. And so the sack numbers might not be wowing, but the
tape is good though.
Yeah, he's a really good player. I would put his tape well behind Will Anderson and Jalen Carter in this class, but I know how teams operate, and there's a lot of projection involved here. And we saw a player go all the way up to number 1, and Tyree Wilson might not be a worse prospect than Walker was last year. So
yeah, right.
I really think that at least among the top 3 non-quarterbacks off the board, and you can pretty much pencil that in right now with Tyree Wilson, and you've got him going 7 here to the Raiders, which brings us to the Atlanta Falcons at 8.
Yeah, and maybe they would jump on Wilson as well. I think this is a defensive pick, so I gave them Christian Gonzalez, who I think is the most talented corner in this draft. Put him opposite A.J. Terrell, and you start to have some identity on defense.
Looking at the corners, Devin Witherspoon, I just have a hard time he's going to be going that high and into the top 10 because, he's 180 pounds. And
he's skinny.
It doesn't happen. I don't know if I saved it, but I saw some numbers about outliers at the cornerback position. You had to go back to, I think it was 2006 to find a corner that light that was drafted that high. And I think the last 2 times it's happened where a corner was under 181 pounds, which is where Witherspoon – and there's some other really
Banks is like 165,
166, I think.
Oh, yeah, right. And he looks it. His ankles are this big, and
that's really hard. As good as his tape is, like that's not going to fly for some teams. They're not going to touch you at all, let alone that high. So really interesting.
You tackle Nick Chubb once in a while. Yeah.
And you can get muscled for the ball in the NFL like you don't in college. And I love the tape for Witherspoon. I think it's the best tape out there. But
me too.
We talked about it with CJ Stroud, and that's sort of my point here with Christian Gonzalez being the top corner in this class. He just checks more boxes, and he's a really good prospect in his own right. So
exactly.
CB1, Christian Gonzalez.
Agreed.
Chicago Bears, after trading from 1 all the way down to number 9. I really like this pick, Matt, with Paris Johnson of Ohio State. And I want to hear your thoughts on why you had him specifically against the other offensive tackles in this class. But I just went and watched some offensive tackles in the last 24, 48 hours. And I think I settled in on Paris Johnson as the top guy too, because of his length, because of his size, but his movement ability. And he's just got a more power element. He can lean on players because of his size. And Skoronski's such a technician and turns guys so easily in the run game. And, but you do see some stuff on tape where it's like he's just not as physically impressive as someone like Paris Johnson. So when you're projecting and you want someone who can be a blindside guy, length athleticism. He's the whole package. I think I do like Paris Johnson a little bit more than Skoronski and Broderick Jones, even though they are both good prospects too.
Yeah, he's a little more prototypical, and everything you said, I just, ditto. I 100% agree. Seems like an ideal guy to match with another Ohio State guy, Justin Fields, make his life a little bit easier. Pretty happy moving from 1 to 9 and getting what you hope is a franchise left tackle.
Yeah, put him at left tackle. You put him right tackle if you want. For a year, if you like what's going on, with your left tackle, or you just want to see with their 5th round steal of a pick last year, move him to the right side. So you can do a lot if you're the Bears. And looking at their free agent picture, they've left themselves open to a offensive tackle here, which is clearly something where need is going to start to meet value, and they'll probably have their pick of at least the top 2 or probably the top offensive lineman in this class at number 9, which they still need. Or if someone like Tyree Wilson is still there, or if Jalen Carter is still there, they're still wide open to draft any of those guys.
100%. And I even considered Witherspoon, just keep him in Illinois. They'll get a top defensive guy, or their pick of or maybe not their pick, but a premier offensive tackle. So that's a good place to start.
What direction do you like for the Philadelphia Eagles at 10, the first of their 2 first-round picks?
This one, not that I regret it. I gave them Miles Murphy. When in doubt, give them a defensive lineman. And I turned this in 3 or 4 days ago for the Steelers. And not that I've soured on Murphy in the last 2 or 3 days, but I just get the feeling he might go middle of the first round, not 10, 11, 12 neighborhood.
This is where it starts to get difficult because
right.
And this is why I like your first 9 picks, because I think that's it's harder to poke holes in those prospects, and teams. The problem with mock drafts is mock drafters go need where teams don't as much post free agency. They want to hit their needs in free agency. They're going to draft the guy who's highest on their board. And it's the more holes you can poke through a guy. Is production not there? Is he only 181 pounds? You can start to poke holes in guys, and the further you go down the list, the more holes there are to poke in some of these prospects. And so that's why it starts to get difficult. But at 10, it's really hard to project anybody else unless someone falls out of that top group that we just talked about.
Yeah, the first go round I had Witherspoon going, but they kept both corners. So I said, they always draft defensive lineman. He's my favorite one on the board.
I will say sneaky offensive line could potentially be a pick just because of some of the age and losing some players along their offensive line. Maybe at pick 10, and they love to go line. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Eagles go Murphy, any defensive lineman, or really any offensive lineman here.
Spoiler, at 30, I gave the Eagles an offensive lineman.
Well, there you go. Yeah. They lost a lot of pieces. They could go they could go DB as well. How about the Titans at 11?
They need a lot. They could have their choice of receivers here. I gave him Skoronski because I think there's so many holes on their O-line that if he's not a left tackle, well, he'll fill another hole,
You think quarterback's out of the equation for the Titans here? Because I think just they have too many needs that trading up doesn't really make sense anymore. But if Will Levis falls, would you do that? Or do you think they just need to go fix the rest of their roster first and just not worry about quarterback as much this offseason?
I'll be honest. I think not that their roster is the worst in the league, but where it stands with the quarterback and what their assets are and who their best players are as a running back. And I think they could go any direction. And in terms of just what I have to work with, this would be one of my least favorite GM jobs because I think they have their hands full.
And with quarterback, they did draft Malik Willis last year, who was, as you said, a year away from being a year away.
Yeah.
Well, now he's only a year away. So
maybe
that next step from Malik Willis this year.
Maybe. At least want to see more, but and Tannehill's there. But how long is that going to last? I think they need everything.
You already have a project, so why draft another project if a project quarterback does fall to you at 11 anyway? Houston Texans, their second selection in round number 1.
I know your boy DeMeco Ryans is a build, from the D-line back, but I don't think Witherspoon could fall much further than this. And you give him Stingley and Witherspoon, as 2 first-round picks back-to-back years. I think that's a pretty good building block for the defense.
Absolutely. And they've done a lot of work on the offensive line in free agency.
Yeah.
Take that need definitely off of their list. And look, Devin Witherspoon's a really good player, maybe the best player available at this point. And if you're okay with his size, then you turn in that card.
Yeah, I think so.
Next, we've got the New York Jets, New England Patriots, Green Bay Packers, and the rest of Matt Williamson's mock draft round 1 post free agency. Talk talked about how it is tourney time. Well, guess what? It is Built Bar March Madness as well. The Built March Madness bracket is back. We know you have a favorite bar or puff. I know I do. And now's your time to make it count. Go to builtmarchmadness.com to vote for your favorites. I know I'll be voting for the peanut butter bar. If you have a favorite bar, a favorite puff, then you can make that known. And when you do vote for your favorite bar or puff at builtmarchmadness.com, you'll be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. And not only that, one Locked On listener will get a 12-month subscription to Built and have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You got to try Built. Built is the best protein bar ever. Seriously, so amazing. I don't know how they pack all that flavor into a low sugar, low calorie, high protein bar, but and they're so good, you won't realize they are actually good for you as well. And most Built bars covered in 100% real chocolate. So run to builtmarchmadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. We are to pick 13, Matt, and the New York Jets going with the third offensive lineman in this class, Broderick Jones.
Yeah, and maybe Green Bay ends up with this pick. Who knows? But, I mean, that's still in limbo, of course. I can't see the top three tackles falling much further than this. If New England picks 14, I think that's the floor for them. I think they're, oh, man, that we almost thought we had our guy, and the Jets grab him. I don't know what to think of Mekhi Becton at this point of his career, but you can put Jones on either side. He's played guard. Just throw him on that line.
Yeah, and if this is the Packers, they might make the same pick too.
Right,
so
right.
I like Jones here. I like the value. And if Skoronski and Paris Johnson are off the board, it's a really easy selection because there's a lot to like with Broderick Jones. Yeah. I think he's more raw. Skoronski's sort of the high floor, low ceiling pick, and maybe he ends up at guard. Paris Johnson's got all the length and size in the world, and it's really easy to project him as a starting offensive tackle in the NFL. Broderick Jones might even be the highest upside of the three, but a little bit more raw, a little bit more to work with, and the younger of the three prospects, but still a lot to like. Maybe less plug and play than the other two, though.
And maybe Becton gets traded. It seems like he's fallen out of favor there.
Although I will say Mekhi Becton put some photos on social media recently.
Oh, did he?
Lost a bunch of weight. So it looks like he's at least going to have the, and it happens every year with half of every football team in the NFL. But best shape of his life, Mekhi Becton, coming your way this summer.
Jerome Bettis, best shape of his life. Still looks like a 265-pound bully ball to me, but we always make that joke around here. Yeah.
Let's move this rapid fire so we can finish this up with the rest of the first round of this mock draft. And you got the New England Patriots going Jordan Addison, wide receiver at 14. The Packers with another wide receiver, Jackson Smith and Jigba, to the Packers at pick 15. How do you differentiate between those two wide receivers?
I just think the Patriots gave up a slot, added a slot, and Addison's a little more of a big play guy, where Smith and Jigba is a chain mover. I think they needed a little more big play potential and would have preferred a tackle. Where the Packers have Christian Watson, I think they'd gladly take Smith and Jigba, who would be their slot in a very different type receiver than their best asset there now.
I like it. I totally agree. The great fit there with Jackson Smith and Jigba with Green Bay.
I love him. Yeah, I think he's really good.
On last year. 16 Washington Commanders cornerback Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State. Your Pittsburgh Steelers with Brian Brzee, defensive tackle from Clemson. And at 18, Detroit Lions' second selection in this draft, Lucas Van Ness, a defensive end from Iowa. I've even seen Lucas Van Ness go as high as number 6 to the Detroit Lions. And so really nice fit there, could move around, especially when you go to those, those NASCAR packages, and you can even move him in and rush him from the inside with some of the other young talent they have on the defensive line.
Yeah, I like that fit a lot for the Lions. I mean, putting Van Ness with Hutchinson makes all the sense in the world. Move them all over the place. The Commanders have a good pass rush. Porter can be that press man guy. And I look at Brzee and think, boy, he could put him next to Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi, and you got some real talent in the middle of that defense.
Was it hard for you not to just let Broderick Jones maybe slide a few more picks to the Steelers at 17?
And trust me, everyone mocks Joey Porter Jr. the Steelers, who was one pick there. Yeah. That's another one running joke around here. Do you know that's Joey Porter's kid and played for the Steelers? Yeah, I'm aware. Yeah, thanks.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the slide for, I don't know if it's a slide necessarily. It's hard
I don't know what to do with
check
him.
where a running back is going to go, but Bijan Robinson here going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 19. And my thoughts are that Bijan Robinson goes in that area that we were talking about earlier, Matt, when the quote unquote first round grades are done and you're sitting there looking at the board and it's like, well, this is just another tier of player now. We've got Bijan Robinson up here in this other tier. And there's no other players from that tier that are available. So let's just pick the best player. And I think that might be where we see Bijan go at the second half of round one. Where did your tier end for you with those players you said that had sort of first roundish grades?
I would probably say the top 16. Well, I think Van Ness is probably almost guaranteed to get in the first round. Bryce, I've seen go every which way.
Yeah.
Bijan, I would bet goes in the first round. I figured you'd give me a hard time. I didn't know what to do with him. So I gave him the Bucks and just thought, if you're really rebuilding this thing and blowing it up, I mean, you would not want to invest in a running back now. But I wanted to put him somewhere in this neighborhood, and they don't have much at the position as we speak.
Yeah, it's too high for me.
Yeah.
For a few reasons, but it's hard to project. So I can't fault you too much, especially when you get to that portion of round one. So I totally get it there. Here's a guy with some serious helium. Nolan Smith, edge from Georgia, had an awesome combine. Apparently his interviews went great as well. He's not afraid to do the dirty work, even though he's sort of an undersized speed rusher. You would think, oh, he's terrible against the run. He actually might be better against the run than he is as a pass rusher, despite his speed. I think he's got a lot of work, which is why I think he might get overdrafted, because I don't think he plays to what his workout numbers are. But man, it seems like impossible he gets out of the first round now.
Yeah, and this might be his floor. I mean, there was a couple times I almost put him in at like 12, 13. I mean, there's a lot to like. And some people think he might be an off-the-ball linebacker as well. Not Micah Parsons, but do both things like Parsons.
Especially if you have a multiple front. I could absolutely.
Yeah.
That is Nolan Smith, Georgia edge to the Seattle Seahawks at pick 20. Pick 21, Darnell Wright, offensive tackle out of Tennessee, to the Los Angeles Chargers. At pick 22, Baltimore Ravens select Quentin Johnson, wide receiver from TCU. Minnesota Vikings, Deonte Banks, corner from Maryland at 23. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, Cam Smith, corner from South Carolina at 24. Back-to-back DBs here at 23, 24, 25, Matt, with the New York Giants going Brian Branch out of Alabama. So I want to talk about the three DBs. How did you decide between those DBs and those teams?
I think Deonte Banks has an awful lot of helium too, and this might be his floor. I think he's established himself pretty much locked in as a top 4 corner. Minnesota wants to play a lot of man with Brian Flores. Jacksonville's always been a tough one for me. I don't know what to do with them, to be very honest. The first go around, I gave him a tight end. That never seems to add up where it's a slam dunk for them. I almost gave them Branch, who's the next pick. And I did give the Giants Branch just because, in case people aren't aware, I mean, Wake Martindale's defense plays with more defensive backs on the field than any team in the league. I mean, lots of dime, lots of 7 DBs. And he can do like all of the above. So he would never leave the field for him.
Brian Branch is probably my player right now who's really good, but his combine speed wasn't great. And when you look at what he projects to, free agency told us that the league doesn't value sort of the slot safety type of defensive back as much as you would expect. And he's not a freak. He's not like in the Minka, Derwin James, and those guys even fell in their draft. Derwin James went like pick 17 or something, and he was a freak of nature across the board. So Brian Branch, I don't know what his over-under is with draft props right now, but I might take the under on Branch, not because he's not a good player, but I just think there are other directions that teams will go, and Branch could fall to a little bit, which means he's going to end up going late round 1 to a really good team. And everyone's gonna be like, how did everybody pass on this great player? And so team, it's already a playoff team, got him to add to their secondary.
And he'll go to the Pro Bowl and be like, remember when he didn't have a good combine and we cared about that? You know, but he doesn't look like Hamilton out of Notre Dame that went to Baltimore that is going high. You know what I mean? Like,
who slipped too, even though he was a freak.
Exactly. Good point.
By the way, how about Brian Branch to the Philadelphia Eagles to replace Chauncey Gardner-Johnson?
Perfect. Yeah. Maybe that's his floor. Maybe he goes to 30,
Jalen Hyatt, speedy wide receiver to the Dallas Cowboys here.
This was before the Cooks trade, by the way. So my condolences.
You think that's enough to scare them off? Maybe they go.
Maybe not.
Dalton Kincaid, tight end out of Utah, is the next pick, and with Dalton Schultz now leaving in free agency from the Dallas Cowboys, maybe they start to they are the first team to get that stretch of tight ends going, and we start to see a run starting at 26 of tight ends.
Yeah, I think that's possible. And the way I have this going is Hyatt to Dallas, Kincaid to Buffalo, and then Mayer to the Bengals, who lost Hayden Hurst. And there's going to be another tight end that goes in this mock. So maybe Dallas does grab them now to kind of complete the offense, or best defensive player available almost. Just give me your best D lineman of, maybe the Northwestern kid, or, the dude out of Georgia Tech, White, and some of those guys. They go a lot of directions the more I think about it.
Those 3 tight ends, is that how you have them ranked, or was there a certain certain fit that you liked? So you have at 27 to end the first round, you have a 27 Dalton Kincaid out of Utah to the Buffalo Bills.
Mm-hmm.
At 28, the next pick, Cincinnati Bengals going Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. And then at 31 to end the first round, the Kansas City Chiefs, Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State.
Yeah, I actually did a video for today. Those 3, as well as the big fellow Washington from Georgia, are just, what flavor ice cream do you like? To me, you can put those 4 in a bag, shuffle them up, whatever order you like. My favorite is Musgrave, but I just think the Bills need a receiver. I would love to have given them a wide out here. Kincaid's the best pure receiver. The Bengals, if you remember, they brought their system from the Rams, and that the Rams system wants a guy that can block. He just doesn't want a pure Evan Ingram type receiver. Mayer is a true 2-way, do-it-all type of guy. And I just was too psyched about Musgrave teaming with Kelsey, learning from Kelsey. As much 2 and 3 tight end stuff as they did, giving them another young, highly talented weapon, who's my favorite tight end, I thought was too good to pass up.
Yeah, some guy that can hit the seam on the opposite side and just really stress the middle of the field for those defenses.
Yep, absolutely.
And in between those 3 tight ends, 29 New Orleans Saints selecting Keon White, defensive end from Georgia Tech. And at 30, the Philadelphia Eagles going with the offensive lineman you teased earlier. This is the guard out of Florida, Osiris Torrance.
Yeah, and Beef Jurgens is going to be the guard this year, but the way they're designed is for a super athletic center flanked by 350-pound guards. So I think they want to get back to that formula when Jurgens takes over the Kelsey role, and Torrance would be that huge guard flanking him. And the Saints have a type up front too. They want Cameron Jordans, they want Davenports, they want 270-pound ends that can kick inside, and maybe Keon White's their next Cam Jordan.
And that's the other thing to remember when you are drafting need-wise for teams in your draft projections and your mock drafts. You might look at next year's needs more so even than the current right now needs. And that's what this pick is for the Philadelphia Eagles, because Jurgens deserves to start now in year 2. And they probably were a little bit surprised and didn't know if Kelsey was going to be back. But even when he is gone, this is the last year of his career, 1-year deal, pretty much know that he's going to retire after this season. Jurgens goes back to center, and, maybe Torrance doesn't even start as a rookie, but a lot of rookies don't start. It's hard even at pick 30 to say this guy's 100% going to start for my team. And then you have year 2 Torrance, year 3 Jurgens, and you're rolling on your offensive line.
And they're just keeping a strength of strength. It's worked so well. Why would we mess with it?
There you go. That is Matt Williamson's post-free agency mock draft. What did he get right? Let me know at BD Peacock on Twitter. What did he get wrong? Let Matt know at Williamson NFL. Let us know in the YouTube comments as well. And make sure you're subscribed up to the brand new Peacock and Williamson YouTube channel as well. Matt and I back tomorrow with your questions at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter. Right here, Peacock and Williamson.